If you realize your family doctor's been lying to you, giving you shots you don't need, prescribing you unnecessary prescriptions, not telling you about the possible side effects, clearly not giving you all the information you need, would you ever trust him again? Of course not. You'd run for the hills and get a new doctor and tell everybody he's a quack. That quack doctor is the CDC. We told you earlier this week about the bombshell New York Times report that exposed the CDC for not telling us the truth about vaccines and for hiding COVID data from us. They hid information on boosters. It turns out, for Americans under 50 who are already vaxxed, we didn't need the booster this fall. We were already perfectly protected. But they didn't release that data. They concealed it. So millions got a shot they didn't need, so Big Pharma could get paid. They also buried all the data on COVID infections and hospitalizations, broken down by age, race, and vax status. We could have judged who was getting sick and who wasn't, and who was getting infected after being vaxxed. They hid the breakthrough cases, too, and they lied. They said they weren't tracking that. Knowledge is power, and they didn't want us knowledgeable. When the New York Times reached out for comments, they said, they've been slow to release all the data because, they didn't think it was ready for prime time. And because they didn't want Americans to think the vaccine wasn't working. Well, it wasn't working the way they said it was supposed to work. They said you couldn't catch COVID if you were vaxxed. That's why they pushed the mandates, remember? But that begs the question, do they have other data that isn't ready for prime time? What else are they lying about? The former National Institutes of Health director admitted the vaccine has some side effects that they didn't reveal to us. And they must know that America is one of 7 countries in the entire world that masks kids in class. Just 7. Given the gravity of this, you'd think the media would have had a field day with it. But they didn't. CNN gave it less than 2 minutes of coverage, and MSNBC mentioned it once. What about the networks? CBS News covered it and NBC gave it less than 20 seconds. But it makes sense. The CDC, Big Pharma, and the media all have the same agenda. Keep us in a permanent pandemic for profits and for power. And they can't admit their corrupt motives. Now, they're in too deep. Joining me now, Hoover Institution's senior fellow, Dr. Scott Atlas. Dr. Atlas, do you see this scandal as I see it? This seems pretty horrible.
Well, it's absolutely horrible and frightening, and it's really just a continuation of everything that I saw when I was in the White House myself. This is not new. It's just that finally others are discovering it or finding this out. The CDC did the same thing with their really laughable stuff they put forward on masks. Do you remember the 2 hairdresser study that was so-called research? That was garbage. They've put forward and really pseudo-science trying to manipulate the public and trying to just push an agenda. This is the politicization of what was the world's most respected public health agency. They have destroyed the trust we regular people put in them. The fact is, I had lost trust in them when I saw it with my own eyes. It was gross incompetence. They didn't know what they were doing. This is not new to this CDC director, by the way. This happened under the previous CDC director. Remember holding up a mask and saying that this mask is better than any vaccine? So this kind of hiding data, distorting data, and being politicized really is now finally being revealed. People like me, who are legitimate, objective reviewers of the data, we are forced to look at other countries. It's sad to say, but when I give talks on what the data is on the vaccines, I cite the data from Israel, from Denmark, from the UK, because our data is simply not to be trusted because the CDC is a politicized, agenda-driven, almost sort of a disgrace to the country.
Yeah, it's corrupt, and now everybody knows it. And we're not going to let them get away with it. Dr. Scott Atlas, thank you so much.